Hi there. I've just been listening to a talk that Corey has given on suffering and if it matters objectively. I agree with his conclusion, but in it he mentioned Buddhism, and I'd like to add a little clarification regarding Buddhism and its program on suffering. The first noble truth of Buddhism is that life is dukkha, and this is seriously misleading when dukkha is translated as suffering. There is no English equivalent, but it's probably best translated as discontentment, though usually nowadays we just use the word dukkha. The sort of suffering that morphine might address, for example, is not the problem that Buddhism addresses. It's specifically not trying to rid us of that sort of physical suffering. No, it's much more of a mundane discontentment that life seems to orbit and joy seem to revert to inevitably. It's pretty uncontentious observation that our nature is to want what we don't have, or to cling to what we desire, or avoid what we fear. And this is not just a temporary malfunction of humans, but arises from our evolutionary nature. And more by the principle of anicca, that changes in the nature of existence. So the fear of happiness ending is the worm and the apple of delight. This translation also contributes, unfortunately, to Buddhism's reputation as a pessimistic program, especially in these days when Western culture believes that happiness is almost a duty, and saying that life is suffering is heresy. But Buddhism doesn't say that. The teaching is far more nuanced. It's not about pain or even anguish, but the discontentment that sooner or later turns our joys to sadness, and which as often as not about protecting our vulnerable ego. The fact that we use inordinate amounts of our resources to enhance this fragile ego is surely indisputable. The Christian tradition also, with St. Augustine, felt the need to recognize this intrinsic element of human nature in the doctrine of original sin, which recognizes that being out of sorts in creation is not a temporary malfunction, but it is a disorder arising from being in a wrong relationship to God. A different etiology in Christianity than in Buddhism, so a different treatment. Heal the relationship. The Buddhist program explains things differently and therefore has a different cure. It arises from wrong-headedness. That's the second noble truth. So the solution is to remove the wrong-headedness. That's the third noble truth. And then the fourth noble truth is actually the technique. And that technique is made up of ethical behavior, which is called shila, sharpening the mind instrument, which is called samadhi, and then pursuing insight with this more efficient instrument, and that's called panya. And this comprises the Noble Eightfold Path. Those writers of the Pali Canon loved numbers and lists. It's a feature of our higher human reflective consciousness that enables us to even imagine ourselves in futures we don't want, that gives rise to suffering in the ways that animals don't. And it's this which Buddhism addresses. For humans, the present reaches far further into our remembered past or into the anticipated future than it does for animals. The theistic religions solve this condition by giving us someone to strengthen us when confronting these fears and hopes. The deity. The non-theistic ones, like Taoism and Buddhism, solve it by bringing this out-of-control monkey mind back to a present less swept away by these disrupting fantasies. But they all seem at their best to converge on love as the royal road. Put simply, it allows us to experience the transformative power of self-forgetting, when the self-fussing ego is dethroned from the centre of the picture and others are let in. It's the meaning of the cross, of the bodhisattva, and of the sage. They all tell us the same numinous experience of transcendence, and that comes by awakening love within the heart. This love or compassion is often awakened by our capacity to identify with the sufferings of others and to put aside our own needs in order to alleviate their pain. And all these paths have discovered this reality. But as long as our response to pain and suffering is rejection, just putting the pain away or trying to escape from it, we will keep on grasping for diversions like drugs or shopping or ego or self-obsession, which only inflames the problem because it stops us from understanding the cause of suffering and missing the transcendent potential of participating in the world's suffering. If suffering in ourselves or others is an intrinsic part of our humanity, then it's in our response to this that we become truly humane.